The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll give everyone a minute to filter in and get started shortly. All right. Thank you for joining us today for this February 25th DMS 2.0 Universal TA call. Before we get started, I wanted to go over just a few technical logistics. First, all attendees will be muted for the majority of this webinar. At times, you may be prompted to raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. You will be unmuted and remuted by an organizer in that situation. To submit questions for speakers, enter your question in the questions dropdown in your control panel. And a quick recording notice, the American Institutes for Research allows for the recording of audio, visuals, participants, and other information sent, verbalized, or utilized during business-related meetings. By joining a meeting, you automatically consent to such recordings. Any participant who prefers to participate via audio only should disable their video camera, so only their audio will be captured. Video and/or audio recordings of any AAR session shall not be transmitted to an external third party without the permission. So just keep in mind, you don't have to worry about your video. That will not be recorded, but do keep this in mind if you decide to raise your hand or share your audio at any point. You can also access the recording of this webinar on the Ideas That Work website. We're going to be putting the link in the chat. I think Blythe has already put that in there. And now we're going to turn it over to Greg Core, the Director of MSIP.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our monthly DMS 2.0 TA call. So I think most of you know we're holding these universal TA calls each month for all states to inform them of different aspects of our differentiated monitoring and support system. A few weeks back, we informed everyone that in support of President Biden's executive order regarding reopening our nation's schools, that we would be in turn refocusing or pivoting this year's DMS activities. On today's call, Kate Moran and Jennifer Simpson, who lead our DMS and program implementation teams respectively, will provide you with more information about this pivot so that you know what to expect over the next few months. In addition, we'll be highlighting two of our OSEP-funded TA centers, ECTA and DAISY, to learn more about some of the resources that they have available. Kate, I'm going to turn the call over to you then to kick us off.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Greg. And thank you everyone for joining us once again for our Universal TA call related to our DMS activities. I just wanted to briefly highlight the items that we're going to be talking through today. As you can see here on our agenda, we will review some of the DMS pivot activities that we highlighted on our earlier call on February 11th. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about monthly calls, updated guidance and technical assistance, our commitment to DMS 2.0. We'll be reviewing our logic model and our DMS 2.0 roadmap, and then talk a little bit about our upcoming activities, and then we'll be passing it off to our TA partners from ECTA and DAISY. So Swati, can you move to the next slide, please? So just to highlight at a high level, we announced on February 11th our DMS 2.0 pivot. This was to be in alignment with the current administration's goals and objectives that they have in place. We wanted to change our focus to address the ongoing COVID-19 and pandemic issues and concerns that states are facing, to be able to talk about school, preschool reentry, resumption and continuation of EIS services, and recovery from the pandemic, and be able to work with our states on those topics. We'll be working with states on meeting the needs of our infants, toddlers, and children and youth with disabilities and their families, and then working with you on delivery. So whether it be virtual, hybrid, or other models, talking about what those requirements are and ensuring that we're working with our student population and infants and toddlers to provide that instruction. We'll also be working on some fiscal guidance related to ESSER, the GEAR, and IDA funds that have been allocated to address some of the needs that have come up related to the pandemic. And then we want to continue to message this, that we remain committed to our DMS 2.0 activities that we began, and we'll be continuing to update you on some information about that. And I'll talk a little bit later on in the slide presentation about that. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Jennifer Simpson, who's going to talk a little bit about our direct COVID-19 response and our activities with our states. So Swati, if you want to move to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Now that we are engaged in the DMS pivot, there are a number of activities that we would like to do in order to provide support to you around your efforts to resume services, reopen programs, and make sure that you can serve the needs of infants, toddlers, youth, and children with disabilities. So some of those activities are the following. One, we're going to do a follow-up to the initial review that we conducted of COVID-19 policies that you had posted to your websites. In addition, we're going to have particular topical areas that we will address in our monthly TA calls with you. And these calls are the calls that your state leads normally conduct with you, just to get an update about what's happening in the state, to talk along with you about our procedures related to grants, SPP, APR, and so forth. And in addition, talking with you now about what's happening in the state, and particularly at your local levels with regards to service provision for children. What does that look like? Are there differences across your state, and so forth? Kate already mentioned the guidance. We're going to be revisiting the OSEP guidance that we've already published and considering other topical areas for new guidance. In addition, we're going to collaborate with our research to practice colleagues here in OSEP and make sure that we can continue to partner with OSEP-funded TA centers so that we work together in providing supports to states and we don't have any duplication of efforts. And then also we plan to collaborate with stakeholders. So reaching out to different groups, parent centers, NASD, ECTA, ICA, so all of the groups, many of which are represented on this call, just to see what you're hearing as you're working with states and as you are engaging with them to make sure that they have the resources and supports needed in order to continue to serve children and families. Next slide, please. I just mentioned the COVID policy review, and as you may recall, OSEP conducted this review back in late October, where we informed you that we were going to be looking at state websites and conducting a review, that is, of any policies and procedures that were posted that were crafted in order to address issues around the pandemic. Now, there was no requirement that states have these documents posted on their websites, but in those instances where those documents existed, we were taking a look just to see how states were conducting service provision under the pandemic. And we were also trying to see if there were anything presented there that may have been red flags or any language that might have been confusing or unclear for your local programs or for other stakeholders that might have been reviewing those documents. Now we're ready to move forward with a follow-up to that review process. And that follow-up will consist of two major focus areas. One being circling back to states where we found some concerns. So just trying to figure out if that those documents are still posted, if those concerns still exist, and engaging in a conversation with you about why we have some concerns about the language in those documents and what needs to happen in order to make sure that those documents are corrected. In addition, we plan to work with states where we found things that may have been confusing or unclear. Now, we're well aware that many of you engaged in practices that you felt were necessary in order to keep your programs operating, especially when the pandemic first evolved back in March of last year. And we know that many of you have, since that time, reviewed our OSEP guidance, have made some changes to your own guidance documents, and may in fact have removed some of the documents that we saw back in October. So in any case, as part of this follow-up work, we will have those discussions with you to understand the status of your documents, to figure out if anything needs to be addressed, and also to get a sense as to what guidance documents you've crafted now to address resumption of services or reopening. We also, though, want to let you know, as part of this process, if we find something that needs to be corrected, if there's something that's inconsistent with IDEA, we have an obligation to inform you of that. But we also have procedures in place that allow you to engage in a correction process before we would even get to the point of having to issue a finding. So more to come with how we're going to structure that work, but this is just a brief synopsis of what we have planned with regards to that endeavor. Another focus of our work will be around our monthly calls with you as state leads. So as I said before, we plan to add some additional topical areas as part of those calls. So we want to find out if you're continuing to use some of the COVID guidance that you may have crafted. We also want to know how services are being resumed in your state. We know for many Part C programs, for example, they didn't necessarily take a break from face-to-face service provision. Instead, they may have added virtual as an option for families. So that's something we'd like to hear more about. In other instances for Part C, they had to go all virtual. They may not have been able to conduct face-to-face activities. And then we know with school-aged children, we have many definitions of reopening. So we have some states where their local districts are actually opening school buildings and students are coming, but they're still using devices and they're still connecting virtually with their teacher with just a monitor in the classroom. And then we have other situations where reopening means that the teacher is present, students are present, and the students are engaged in instruction in the traditional way. And then we all are familiar with hybrid models. So a mix of many different models of instruction, a mix that may involve certain days of the week where in-person instruction occurs and certain days where students are virtual. So we just want to get an understanding of what that looks like in your state, what that looks like with your local programs. And then in turn, we'd like to know about how you are sharing guidance with your local programs, how you're ensuring that they are providing service provision in accordance with IDEA, and just what your procedures are for maintaining your general supervision responsibilities as states as you're working with your local EIS programs, working with preschools, and working with school districts. Next slide, please. Now, with regards to guidance, we plan to revisit the guidance that we already have published. We want to make sure that responses to some of the questions are very clear and see if we need to supplement any of those responses in those instances where states have communicated that the guidance is difficult to interpret. In addition, there are other topics that we are considering. We know many states are asking for guidance from OSEP around compensatory services, or some states are talking about recovery services. Certainly Part C to B transition is one where many states have asked for some guidance from us. There are a number of fiscal issues that could be addressed with guidance documents related to the pandemic and reopening. And then we know that many states are bracing themselves for some of the mental health and behavioral challenges that they may see as services resume and as school-aged children return to the school environment. So these are just a few of many topical areas under consideration. And this is one area where we would really be able to utilize any information you can provide us through the COVID follow-up or the monthly TA calls to let us know what's happening in your state, what do you need from us, and how we can be supportive to you. And as I said before, we're going to partner with our research to practice colleagues and OSEP funded TA centers to conduct this work. Next slide, please. All right, and then while this is going on, the work around DMS 2.0 will continue. And by that, I mean the internal work that we're conducting within OSEP. So we will continue to finalize materials. We'll continue to work on our procedures so that when October 2021 comes, we'll be able to hit the ground running and we won't have any delays in making sure that we resume the work that we were doing with our cohort 1 states. In addition, we want to continue to have engagement activities with our stakeholders, have universal TA calls like the one today, where we cover any topics related to DMS and also address any needs that you express to us related to the pandemic. And then we want to finalize protocols and make them available to all states so that they can use this universal TA documents and help you to examine your systems, examine your policies and so forth. And also might be instances where you may want to engage with TA providers on any areas of the protocol where you think you want to conduct some work. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Kate at this time.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. You can move to the next slide, please. We wanted to circle back to our logic model that we rolled out on our call on February 11th, just to walk through it a little more in depth than we did on that call. I want to draw your attention to the left part of the slide where our inputs are laid out. So we have our DMS 2.0 process with both the SPP, APR, and our grant application activities that feed into this work. I want to highlight that this process with DMS 2.0 is carried out across 3 phases. So you see the phase 1 activities are pre-site work, our phase 2 activities are on-site and virtual work, our phase 3 will be follow-up and correction. The outputs that we are looking at within each phase, so at phase 1, we're really just consulting with states, reviewing protocol information, preparing for phase 2. Phase 2 is about evaluating implementation, interviewing some local folks during that activity, and probably engaging in some more specific interview conversations with you at a state level. And then the third phase output would be ensuring the correction of any outstanding findings that are identified throughout either phase 1 or phase 2. Some short-term and mid-term outcomes and results. We're looking to identify any issues or areas of concern through our DMS 2.0 process. We'll work with you to develop plans for follow-up and really try to present a transparent and comprehensible system. Our midterm results, we want to ensure that OSEP is fulfilling our responsibility to monitor our grantees, that we're aligning results and compliance in our OSEP monitoring, and that we're providing differentiated and meaningful support and technical assistance with that long-term overall impact that through these activities, we are ultimately looking to improve outcomes and results for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities and their families. So we'll move to the next slide, please. Wanted to take a second to walk back through our 8-year overarching view of what this looks like, and then we'll get more specific to our roadmap, which takes you kind of across year 1 of this and year 2. So when we look at the left side, we've got year 1 where we are engaging in the school reopening and pandemic support. We're continuing our protocol development and we're going to be engaging in some feedback loops that I'll talk about in a little bit. And then also providing these universal TA opportunities. So that's the 2020 to 2021 year. As we go into year 2, which is 2021 to 2022, we would be re-engaging with our cohort 1 states on those phase 1 pre-site monitoring activities. And as it goes into each year, you can see a cohort is added in The phasing will change. So cohort 1 in year 3 is on phase 2. Cohort 2 is beginning their phase 1 activities. And it walks through each year in that cycle as we get to year 8, the 2027 to 2028. We would be working with cohort 5 on phase 3, which would be follow-up and closeout activities. All states would be monitored, and we would be probably engaging in a really robust evaluation process. I think at the culmination of each year, we're going to be engaging in some evaluation and response. But I think as we work through this whole process, that's going to be a good point to really reflect on the work we've done over the past 8 years. Next slide, please. So as it moves to the next slide, we would be looking at our roadmap for 2021. You can see over on the left is where we are right now in quarter 1. January, February, March, we're working on our DMS 2.0 pivot plan and development. Right now, we're in the middle of rolling out that pivot, talking to you about the COVID-19 guidance and resources that we're working on. And then it takes you throughout the year where we're continuing our DMS 2.0 protocols. We'll be engaging in some training, some talking about that. And as we look all the way over to the right in Q4, October of 2021 is where we would begin re-engaging with our cohort 1 states on those phase 1 activities, pre-site work, looking at the protocols, policies and procedure reviews, and some targeted interviews that we would be discussing. If you want to go to the next slide. So our roadmap for 2022, which is year 2 of this pivot, our DMS 2.0 activities. All the way on the left of Q1, you can see we're continuing that cohort 1 pre-site work. We'll be rolling out information on the phase 2 activities. And as we move all the way through to Q4, all the way on the right, that's where in October of 2022, cohort 1 would be moving into phase 2. Cohort 2 begins phase 1, and then as always, we'll be providing universal TA and support to all states throughout this process. Next slide, please. So releasing of the cohorts, we know this is a hot topic. We know in each of our calls, folks have been anxiously asking us about this, and we want to highlight that cohorts 1 and cohorts 2 have already been notified. Our intent is to notify each cohort a year in advance of that visit. So that being said, cohort 3 would be announced in September of 2022. Cohort 4 would be announced in September of 2023. And then cohort 5 will be announced in 2024. However, I'm sure by that point, those folks who haven't been in a cohort will probably figure out that they might be in cohort 5. So we'll move to the next slide, please. We wanted to highlight today a couple of our upcoming activities. MSIP and our OSEP funded TA centers will be engaging in a collaborative presentation related to the Q&A guidance that we issued throughout this past year. So on March 11th, which is our next national TA call, we'll be walking through that guidance. The first part will be allocated for Part C. The second part will be allocated for Part B. And we've actually lengthened the time for that call, so it'll be 3:30 to 5 on March 11th. More information will be getting emailed to you about that call and how to register. Technical assistance centers, we're going to be really working closely with them on some facilitated feedback sessions on the protocols that we're developing. So we're in the process of finalizing our integrated monitoring, sustaining compliance and improvement protocols. And then we'll be working with our TA partners to engage with you, our states, on some feedback, some thoughts, some targeted questions about those protocols. We wanted to highlight that our next DMS 2.0 universal TA call will be on March 25th at 4 p.m. We'll be providing information about component-specific protocols, most likely our integrated monitoring and sustaining compliance protocols. And then we'll also be having one of our OSEP-funded TA centers to spotlight any of their TA resources that are related to our general supervision process, and also probably connected to some of this pandemic support that we've been discussing today. So next slide, please. Before we move it to our OSEP funded technical assistance centers, are there any questions that folks have? This would be a good spot. I'm not seeing any in the question box so far. I'm hoping that's working. Normally I see a little bit more chatter in there, but you can feel free to raise a hand. I think that that's on the left side. There'll be some options in there. And then we can unmute you to ask your question, or you can type it into the question box. So any questions? Yes, I can see the test. Thank you for the test. It is working and I can see it. So we just must have addressed everything that folks have questions about today, which is good. All right, well, as we move into the next part of the presentation, you can feel free to type questions in there. And with that, I am going to introduce Ann Lucas, our partner from ECTA, and following their presentation, Grace Kelly from DAISY will be presenting, and Katie McCullough, I wanted to highlight that as well. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn off my camera and mute. Thanks, Grace. Oh, sorry, Grace is going to kick us off. I apologize. There we go.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Kate. Good afternoon, everybody. As Kate just mentioned, Katie and Ann and I will be presenting today on resources that will support you in the DMS process. Next slide. We're going to share resources to specifically around general resources that would apply across all of the puzzle pieces, but also focus on fiscal and accountability. First, I'll tell you a little bit about our two centers, and then we'll dive into the resources that we have to support your work. So the ECTA Center, the Early Childhood TA Center, supports Part C and 619 programs in developing high quality early intervention and preschool education service systems. The focus is on building leadership and program capacity to implement high quality state systems. And in order to build high quality state systems, you have to have high quality data. The next slide talks about DAISY, the IDEA Early Childhood Data Center. And we support Part C and 619 programs and building those high quality data systems you need to have data to improve results for young children with disabilities and their families, a focus of both centers. The next slide. So we've been working together to identify ways that we can support states as they go through the DMS cycle. We'll be able to help you review and enhance your state system, prepare the DMS protocols and identify those evidences that you'll need, collect, report, and analyze the data, and engage and inform stakeholders. And to that end, we have developed several activities that are on the next slide that Cohort 1 has already been engaged in. So we're collaborating with our Early Childhood TA Center partners. We're providing individual TA support to states. We've already convened monthly calls with Cohort 1, and we're beginning to identify the resources we'll have available for Cohort 2 coming very quickly. And we've also, as most of you know, been developing resources to support your states through the pandemic this time. So we'll be pulling those together to support you. So contact your TA Center staff. We've provided a link to the state contacts for ECTA and the DAISY liaison contact list as well. So I want to start to look at, on the next slide, today we're really going to share just some of the resources we have to support your work. And these resources are designed to support the building and enhancing the leadership that you have in your state at all levels to improve systems for children with disabilities and their families. As we share these resources, know that while they'll be very helpful for you through the DMS process, there are also resources that you can use at any time to enhance and improve your systems. So the first resource that we're going to show on the next slide is the Early Childhood Systems Framework. So I think all of you are probably familiar with the framework and the purpose, which is to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of our Part C and 619 programs, and to really look at developing more efficient systems. The framework, as many of you may know, was developed with expertise and knowledge from many of our states and state partners, with the knowledge and expertise of the Early Childhood TA Center. The component related to data was developed by Daisy, and the component developed by the component on professional development was informed by the Early Childhood ECPC, Early Childhood Personnel Center, sorry. So everyone in the field came together to develop this framework that tells us about what a high quality system looks like. On the next slide, there are several resources that can help you as you use the framework. The Quick Start Guide is designed to help state leaders sort of scan your system and identify where you might want to start in assessing your system. The self-assessment is a downloadable tool that if you are in cohort 1, you may have used before, and you could pull that up and look at it, and it identifies where you have your strengths and where you might want to focus. The framework as a whole helps states evaluate their current systems, identify potential areas for improvement, and look at how you can develop a more efficient system. These 3 resources can help you if you have completed them previously to come back and look at those. If you are in the later cohorts, it might be a good time to look at that and assess your system for its strengths and weaknesses. Our next resource are the critical questions. So the critical questions these critical questions help state leaders identify the kinds of data needed for program improvements. So they help you take stock of the data that's available to answer these questions. There are questions that are available, for instance, of how many children are served, how are services delivered. These critical questions can help you think about your system and identify the data that you have to answer those questions. Another resource on the next page, and we're moving quickly because we have a lot to share with you guys today. We know that engaging stakeholders in these discussions is important, and stakeholders can mean your state staff, your local staff, your ICC, key families. So this toolkit was developed, the DAISY Stakeholder Knowledge Toolkit, was developed really to help orient stakeholders to IDEA data and other data related topics to help meaningfully participate in conversations about programmatic issues and decisions. So you can see on the right-hand side is the table of contents, which shows you the topics that are covered and gives you ideas about how to engage stakeholders in those conversations. And on the next slide, before we move into fiscal, for your viewing pleasure, there's a video. So this webinar was designed as we all live in this virtual world for a little while longer. This was developed to help prepare for virtual stakeholder meetings. So this video gives great tips on how to engage staff in virtual discussions, how to make those meaningful, and how to get the best response from all of us as we work virtually. So I will turn it over to Katie now, who will share some of the fiscal resources that are available.
Thanks, Grace. Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk with you about 4 key fiscal resources that we think will be helpful to you as you engage in the fiscal management component of the DMS 2.0. Next slide, please. The first is a collection of Part C Finance 101 modules. And these are brief modules around various topics specific to the federal fiscal requirements that accompany IDEA Part C funds. So those include overview of federal fiscal requirements, obligation and liquidation of funds, post-award requirements, use of funds and prior approval, indirect costs, audits, application requirements, system of payments, methods, and maintenance of effort. As I said, these modules are brief, but if you want to do a quick scan for each module, there's a presentation file that has all of the slides in the module with the associated notes. So if you want to do a quick scan, I'd encourage you to go that way. And states can use these modules to understand the comprehensive array of federal requirements to support the development of internal documents, to beef up the single line of responsibility related to fiscal management of their systems, and or to respond to findings that may come through as a result of the DMS process. Next slide, please. This next resource is on collecting and tracking maintenance of effort data. You know, in Part C, we all informally refer to MOE, but of course the regulation is specific to the prohibition against supplanting requirement. On this web page, you can find a comprehensive overview of the MOE requirements, which includes critical questions to understand the actual implementation of those requirements. This resource also includes a tool for tracking MOE data. So that's essentially your expenditures to budget by funding source. And here we're talking about state and local funds in particular from year to year. And so that's an Excel-based tool that you can use. It also includes a resource that is a comprehensive listing of all potential federal, state, and local funding sources to support Part C, which really helps with that identification and coordination of potential funding sources for the Part C system. So similarly, this resource can be used to understand the fiscal requirements and support development of internal documents and potentially respond to any findings from OSEP related to MOE. Next slide. This third resource is a fiscal data profile template, and it's an Excel-based tool that converts raw program level fiscal data to these engaging graphic displays. I think there are about 8 of them. This one that's on the screen, as you can tell, displays current receipts and anticipated receipts to meet budget. This is a made-up program for wise kids, but it can give you that projection over the course of a fiscal year about where that program stands from expenditures compared to budget. And so in this tool, there is space to enter this data for each program in the Part C system, and then generates statewide totals as well. So this tool can be used for budget development and management, including oversight, to conduct general supervision responsibilities, and also to garner political will for your system, which we all know is critical for Part C. Next slide, please. The last resource I want to share with you is a system of payments monitoring protocol worksheet. And this was based on, the development of this tool was based on the OSEP system of payments monitoring protocol that was developed back in 2016 under DMS 1.0. Back then it was just DMS. But it uses the questions that OSEP identified in that monitoring protocol and provides space, essentially a worksheet, as you can see on the screen, about what's our current processes that we have in place in our state, what available evidence do we have, and then what additional steps or documents need to be in place or developed related to this question. And really, this is meant to provide states sort of a status on where they are in assuring that the implementation of their system of payments policies are being implemented as intended, which is a major focus of the DMS work. I want to say that this is the only tool that was developed by ECTA alone. The other three were in conjunction as part of the ITCA Fiscal initiative, and as part of that initiative, we had partners, currently do have partners with DAISY, ECTA, ITCA, of course. We have partners from OSEP, and previously NCSI was a partner of that work, and Cypher is now a new partner of that initiative going forward. So now I'm going to pass it over to Anne, who's going to be talking about integrated monitoring and sustaining compliance and improvement. Anne?
Hi, thank you so much, Katie. I'm Ann Lucas, and I'm with the DAISY and ECTA Center. And as Katie said, I will be talking about 4 resources related to integrated monitoring, sustaining compliance, and improvement. And let's go to the next slide. I'm going to give you a preview of 2 documents that are coming very, very soon that we're really excited to be able to release. The first document is related to improving Part C results and compliance, a 6-step inquiry cycle. This particular resource was developed by NCSI, ECTA, and DAISY. And we're really pleased to be making it available since it provides like a framework in terms of how to go about focusing on both results as well as compliance in order to ensure that the system is focusing on the most appropriate things for improvement and compliance. The actual document, as it is framed on the website, focuses on 6 steps, and it includes selecting a focus for improvement or compliance, developing an approach for inquiry, collecting data and conducting root cause analysis, developing a plan for improvement or correction, implementing the plan, measuring progress, and refining as needed, and then finally sustaining progress towards improvement and correction. Under each of these steps, there are activities listed out and tips for avoiding pitfalls. The way this document can be used is to really help you identify your areas that you really want to focus on that are most important and critical, whether they be results or compliance, as well as assess some of the steps and processes that you currently have in your overall monitoring system. As well as making sure that you have activities and necessary strategies to ensure that you're sustaining improvement and compliance over time. Let's go to the next document. This is another preview. Next slide, there we go. This is another document, and this particular document was developed by NCSI, ECTA, DAISY, and IDC. It is a guide for both Part B and Part C, and it's related to the processes and requirements related to identifying, correcting, and reporting non-compliance. Within the guide, we cover each of the 5 areas related to identifying non-compliance, making findings of non-compliance, correcting non-compliance, verifying correction of non-compliance, and then actually reporting on that. This guide was really designed to help states make sure that they were doing all of these steps in compliance with IDEA requirements. And this will be available very soon. So let's go to the next slide. This next document has been around for quite some time. It is a document that was developed in conjunction with the Regional Resource Program priority teams in conjunction with representation from various TA centers, including the RRCs, NECTAC at the time, which was the center that preceded ECTA, and also the Data Accountability Center. This document is really helpful in that it helps states understand the use of data analysis in looking at the level and the extent of an issue, whether it is non-compliance or more of a performance issue, and then helping to use that data to make informed decisions about what required actions would be needed to make improvement or to correct non-compliance. So it's really a guide that helps provide some differentiated options that would be available depending upon how far of the actual performance of the program or of the LEA or the performance of individuals within the program. So for example, whether the issue is really with one person in the program or multiple people within the program. So it provides some guidance about some decision making regarding required actions, as well as the amount of data that would be needed to verify correction. And there are some examples in this document, of which this slide shows, that provide some options for states to consider. Frequently, this is a step missed within the monitoring system, but can really help to target and differentiate correction and verification of correction. Let's go to the next slide. And this is a reminder of another document that has been around for a long time that was originally developed in conjunction with the RRC program and the General Supervision Priority Team and the Data Accountability Center and NECTAC at the time. These are two different tools related. They're called the Local Contributing Factor Tools for SPP APR indicators. One document focuses on the Part C results indicators, C2, C4, C5, and C6. It does not cover C3. The other document covers C1, C7, C8. It also covers B11 and B12 for the preschool indicators. This document is a guide that includes a series of questions that local programs, in conjunction with support from the state, can actually use to help dig deeper into why they are having either performance or compliance issues related to the SPP APR indicators. And the questions focus in on whether or not there are sufficient policies and procedures in place to ensure that the requirements associated with that particular indicator are being implemented. It also focuses in on funding availability, training and technical assistance supports, supervision supports, data, available data that's there through the data system or how they're collecting data through other means, personnel, workforce capacity, and then also provider practices. And this tool is really helpful in linking what's contributing to the performance issue with improvement planning. You want to use the information that comes from this particular tool to help develop a meaningful improvement plan, and then over time to continue to keep contributing factors in mind as you think about how you're going to sustain improvement and compliance over time. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to take a few minutes and just highlight a few of the upcoming TA activities and resources that both ECTA and DAISY are planning. And we'll go to the next slide. We do have some upcoming working series that are related to monitoring and accountability. NCSI is a partner with us in these particular working series. The first one is they will both be for small groups of states that apply, and they're for Part C. The first one is related to establishing an effective monitoring system for results and compliance. And we will be working with states to really do kind of a look at their own monitoring systems and help them figure out what aspects of their monitoring system they want to make improvements to. They will hopefully walk away with an idea of potential changes that they want to make in their system. And there will be a series of 3 working sessions with other states with individualized TA interspersed. Then later in the year, we will be doing another working series on incorporating results into local determinations. It'll be structured in the same way as the first working series on effective monitoring system. We also are in the process of developing a document that will help states track correction of noncompliance. It is primarily designed for Part C. It will be hopefully available as part of our effective monitoring working series, but we will make it available to all states as well. We are also planning to do some sort of a fiscal monitoring cohort with a small group of states in the coming months to help them with issues that they're having in regards to fiscal monitoring, primarily those states that have already been through DMS monitoring or have been participating in cohort 1. We also are developing some common fiscal monitoring indicators, a compilation of those based upon the work that some other states have already done on their fiscal monitoring indicators, and we will be making that available as well. And those are related to system of payments. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. And thank you, and wanted to know if you have any questions for any of us related to these resources before we close out.
We do have actually a few questions, and the first one is for Grace, if she can pop on. There was a question about and maybe any of you can probably answer this, but a question about the virtual meeting stakeholder toolkit. Is there a link for that? I don't think that was posted in the chat. Maybe.
Yes, I will get that link right. Can I post in the chat from here?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. Yeah, you can just post it and that'll share to everyone. The other one is for you, Anne. I think people are very excited about some of these tools. We've got a wowza in there about the improving Part C results, the 6-step inquiry cycle, and just people are very excited about the resources. I know you had said that they would be available very soon. Is there anything more specific? I think people are eager to just see them and use them.
Any day now is where we're at.
Okay, all right, good.
We do have, we wanted to preview them. We had hoped that they'd be available today, but we are just running a little bit behind with getting everything together for the 2 new resources. So they are basically ready to go. It's just getting the final sign off, and we'll be
and
ready.
Then some folks had mentioned that when they are ready to go, maybe doing another call, because some folks were thinking maybe not all states were on this call. I don't know. So we can maybe think about setting up another call to roll through those once those are final for everyone.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, and then I think that was most of them were about when they would be available. Yeah, let's see. And if anybody has any questions they want to use the hand raise, they can do that, and then Blythe can unmute you. But I think that's all of them. Yeah. So any other questions from the group here on the line? Blythe, are you seeing anything, or Swati? I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Not seeing any hand raised.
Okay. Well, with that, not seeing any other questions, we believe that the link should be in the chat now for the stakeholder virtual meeting. So go ahead and check that. This call, the recording will be posted. I think it takes a couple of days, but it will be posted on our usual spot where we have our universal TA calls. The recording will be posted along with the PowerPoint that you saw presented today, both our PowerPoint and our OSEP funded TA partners. And we just really want to thank you for your time today. Again, the next TA call we have on deck will be March 11th. That'll be 3:30 to 5. More information to come. Of course, I do see a hand raised. I figured if I talked long enough, somebody would raise their hand. Blythe, do you want to unmute? Can't tell who raised their hand, but I saw a hand up.
Yeah, I did see a hand up. The hand went down though. So
It went
I don't
down.
know if it
Okay,
was,
great.
yeah.
All right, then we'll say goodbye to everybody. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your weekends, the rest of your week, and hope everybody is staying well, safe, and happy. See you next month, or see you on the 11th. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.